not going into the bioavailability of berberine, how to take berberine, what berberine is, the mechanisms of action, and I also wanted to touch on a few research articles that I found, quite a few actually, on colorectal cancer and how berberine has been playing a role through the AMPK. So let's get into that. So what is berberine? Berberine is an alkaloid found in several herbs, but primarily in barberry, golden thread, golden seal, and tree turmeric. It's also been used for a very long time in Ayurvedic medicine, primarily for gut infections, inflammation, diarrhea, and metabolic imbalances. The kicker is berberine has low oral bioavailability, and why is that? It gets kicked out of the cells basically through the P-glycoprotein efflux. It has poor absorption, as well as the first pass liver metabolism. This is why whoever is telling you to take berberine should be telling you to take it with meals, split it up 2 to 3 times a day, usually starting at 500 milligrams, 2 to 3 times a day, with a healthy fat. So your meal should consist of a healthy fat. A lot of times it can increase the risk of having a hypoglycemic event, so you would not want to be taking it while you're fasting because you can risk a hypoglycemic event, meaning low blood sugar. Kind of like turmeric, you've heard take turmeric with piperine or black pepper, and this is the same mechanism. It does increase the absorption, as well as taking a form like liposomal berberine or even berberine phytosomes. Also, you don't want to take it with your probiotics because this can inhibit the absorption. Another thing you will see, especially in herbal remedies, is we cycle them. So a lot of times we will cycle them for a certain amount of weeks. With berberine, research shows around 8 to 12 weeks that you're cycling it. This is not medical advice. This is just what I have seen from research and also how I use in practice. So always ask your dietitian or your health provider that knows about supplements. The normal dose is around 900 to 1500 milligrams per day, and again, this is in divided doses that you're going to be taking it. So now let's get into the scientific portion of it and the AMPK, as well as the mTOR and the other mechanisms of action of berberine. If you have ever found yourself down a rabbit hole of mitochondrial support, you may have heard of AMP. So the AMPK is an AMP protein kinase. You can think of it as the cell's fuel gauge. And so when energy is low, AMPK is going to increase. This is going to help burn fat, it's going to utilize glucose storage, and it's going to help with reducing the fat storage. And some of you may already know, but you can also activate AMPK by exercise or caloric restriction. And we'll kind of tie all of that together because a lot of times when we're talking about insulin resistance, glucose regulation, and even cancer cell tumor suppressing, we are looking at caloric restriction and glucose metabolism, and that is going to be involving reducing mTOR and increasing the AMPK. So you can think of AMPK and mTOR as like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. So AMPK is going to be catabolic, meaning that it breaks things down to make energy, and mTOR is going to be anabolic, where it builds things up to make like muscle growth, is what you'll hear primarily in personal trainers and things that are talking about increasing your mTOR. But a thing with the mTOR is it can also increase cell growth, i.e. tumor cells. So let's recap real quickly before we jump into mTOR. AMPK happens when your energy is low, i.e. your ATP. So when your ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is your energy production, the end product of your Krebs cycle, when that drops, the AMPK is going to increase. So it's basically your cell's emergency response. This happens during fasting, exercise, and even nutrient stress from nutrient deficiencies or insufficient intake. So it tells your cells to stop storing and start burning. And again, Exercise is the most natural way to increase your AMPK, but berberine does mimic these effects. So win-win when you use them together. And mTOR is the opposite of AMPK. It says we have energy, now let's build things. Growth, reproduction, and muscle gain, and again, like I said, self-proliferation, especially when mTOR is in excess, which is linked to aging, insulin resistance, and tumor cell generation. So too much of a good thing is always a bad thing, because too much AMPK is going to lead to poor recovery and also under eating. So with berberine, it kind of helps tip the scales here, and that's going to come in play with high blood sugar or even the insulin resistances, which is why most of us are hearing about this on social media. Okay, so now we've got that out of the way, let's get into what I found most interesting, which was not the blood glucose regulation or the insulin resistance, but how it's tied to cancer. We often hear cancer is fed by sugar. Stop the sugar, don't eat sugar. What is going on? So what people are saying, maybe they do grasp this concept, maybe they don't, but it is called the Warburg effect, and that is where glycolysis comes in. So the cancer cells will ferment glucose into lactate even when oxygen is present, which normally does not happen. Why do they do this? It's because it helps them grow faster and it avoids the oxidative stress. So AMPK is involved because it may reverse or suppress this effect, which makes the cancer cells go back to their mitochondrial respiration, which slows them down or even causes apoptosis or programmed cell death. So where berberine comes in, it is going to activate the AMPK and it's going to inhibit the mTOR. So there were 3 studies that I found, all in 2020, and what they're showing in breast, colorectal, and liver cancers, it's going to slow the cell proliferation and also induce autophagy and even apoptosis, which I mentioned is programmed cell death. And this study, it says individuals 18 to 75 who had at least 1 but no more than 6 histological confirmed colorectal adenomas that had undergone complete polypectomy with 6 months before recruitment were recruited with this randomized controlled trial. So this went on for 2 years, and what they showed was out of the 429 in the berberine group and 462 in the placebo group, 155 participants in the berberine group and 216, so 36 to 47%. In the placebo group were found to have recurrent adenoma during follow-up with this unadjusted relative ratio. However, no colorectal cancers were detected during follow-up. The most common adverse effect was constipation. So the conclusion here is that berberine 300 milligrams twice daily was safe and effective in reducing the risk of reoccurrence in colorectal adenoma and could be an option for chemo prevention after the polypectomy. So let's recap. Berberine supplementation 2 to 3 times a day up to 1,500 milligrams a day is going to activate AMPK, which is basically a metabolic reboot. It helps balance insulin, reduces inflammation, and is going to help slow down mTOR. AMPK also opposes that Warburg effect, so it is going to help suppress the cancer cell growth. And for the best effects, you want to pair it with walking, fasting, even just regular exercise with resistance training, and as well as other nutritional therapies.